This is absolutely unacceptable, Hannah. Blake Donnelly's voice boomed across the sleek glass conference room of Crestline Pharma in Austin, Texas, each word slicing through the thick tension like a blade. A few colleagues shrank back in their seats. I sat frozen, heart pounding, feeling dozens of eyes drilling into me. What should have been a routine quarterly review had morphed into a public humiliation. My name is Hannah Wyatt, and after 22 years at Crestline Pharma, this was how it was all ending. At 58 years old, I had poured my life into this company, built my career on precision, ethics, and unwavering scientific integrity. Every safety procedure, every audit, every compliance report had passed through my hands, carefully and thoroughly. Every intern and junior researcher had learned the ropes under my watch. The Food and Drug Compliance Board has cited major documentation failures, Blake continued, his knuckles white around the meeting notes. $12 million in research grants, gone, he barked, slamming his palm onto the table with a sharp, echoing crack. I felt the familiar urge to defend myself rise in my chest, but I forced it down. This wasn't about truth. This was about optics. About salvaging Crestline's shiny new merger with Orion Therapeutics. Ever since that deal closed 8 months ago, the company's standards had quietly slipped. Speed mattered more than safety. Appearances mattered more than facts. The corporate newcomers played by an entirely different set of rules written in disappearing ink. Due to compliance failures tied to the grant investigation, Blake said coldly, Hannah Wyatt's employment is terminated. Effective immediately. Security will assist with your office clearance. I rose without a word. I smoothed the lapel of my navy blue blazer, the same one I'd worn on my first day, and walked calmly out of the room. Behind me, whispers broke out like a brush fire. As I passed the research wing, I caught sight of Dr. Daniel Cho, one of Orion's prized recruits. His eyes flicked up, guilt flickering across his face before he snapped back to his laptop. That tiny involuntary reaction confirmed what I had long suspected. Only now I had something they didn't know. Long before the merger chaos, I'd been keeping a second set of records, not just what Crestline wanted in the system, but a personal archive. Every deviation, every ignored protocol, every shortcut ordered from the top. Call it paranoia, call it foresight. Today, it was going to be my shield and my sword. It was time to show Crestline Pharma what real accountability looked like. Over the years, I'd watched brilliant young researchers rise, and just as quickly, fall. Some cracked under the relentless push for faster results. Others chased recognition so feverishly, they forgot the very reason they entered science in the first place. But through it all, I had been the constant, the quiet keeper of the lab's integrity, the one who fought to keep our research above reproach. I joined Crestline Pharma when it was still a scrappy independent firm, specializing in rare neurological disorders. Back then, every small breakthrough was celebrated, not crammed into a press release to boost the stock price. Our founder, Dr. Judith Monroe, believed that patients deserved precision. Good science, she'd say, tapping her pen against her notepad, takes time and respect. But when Dr. Monroe retired 7 years ago, everything changed. The new leadership valued flashy patents and grant windfalls over meticulous research. And when the merger with Orion Therapeutics went through 8 months ago, Crestline's soul all but disappeared. Now, standing at the edge of that era, I knew one thing for sure. They had underestimated me. And that was about to be their biggest mistake. I packed my office slowly, fitting 22 years of dedication into a single cardboard box. Photos of research teams long dispersed, awards for excellence in lab operations, and tucked carefully between them, a handwritten note from Dr. Judith Monroe herself, thanking me for standing my ground when it mattered most. Hannah, do you need help? I turned to see Liam Chin, a young research assistant I had personally mentored over the past year. His face was a mix of sympathy and confusion. Thank you, Liam, I said softly, offering a small smile. But I've got this under control. I paused for a moment, feeling the weight of everything I wanted to pass on. One last piece of advice: keep meticulous notes, especially on the trial documentation. His brow furrowed slightly. Is that what this is about? The trial records. Among other things, I replied carefully. Protect yourself, Liam. Always document the truth, even when it's inconvenient. He gave a small, uncertain nod before stepping away. Once alone, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk one final time. Inside was a plain, weathered leather journal, my private ledger. Each page was packed with dates, names, protocol breaches, evidence of misconduct that Orion Therapeutics had worked hard to bury, particularly surrounding Dr. Daniel Cho's rushed clinical trials and the tampered chemical inventory logs. I tucked the journal securely into my bag, then let my eyes sweep slowly around the office that had shaped so much of my adult life: the chipped coffee mug, the corkboard covered in research notes, the panoramic window overlooking downtown Austin, the view that had kept me company through countless late nights. At the door, I paused and flicked off the lights, whispering a soft goodbye to the woman I had once been. That night, at my kitchen table, I spread the journal open. Page after page stared back at me, a silent but damning record. And tomorrow, the truth would finally come to light. Notes, printed screenshots with timestamps, emails that contradicted the official reports, it all formed a clear, relentless timeline tracing exactly when Crestline's research standards had begun to crumble. It all pointed back 3 months ago, when Dr. Cho launched his fast-track protocol for a new neurological treatment. By regulation, certain chemical compounds required specialized containment and were supposed to be used in tightly restricted intervals. But the lab log showed glaring gaps. Chemicals allegedly used mere hours apart, and in quantities that shattered every safety standard we had ever followed. When I raised concerns, Blake Donnelly dismissed me coldly. Dr. Cho has executive approval to accelerate the trials, he said. No explanation. No discussion. Then came the clinical result discrepancies, data gaps that magically filled in days later with numbers so flawless they seemed engineered. When I flagged the inconsistencies, Blake's response was razor-sharp. Orion uses different statistical models, Hannah. Focus on operations, not analytics. But the final blow landed like a gut punch. While reviewing the building's security logs, I discovered 3 separate incidents where my ID badge had been used to authorize document changes at times when I wasn't even in the building. Someone had forged my digital trail to legitimize illegal edits to critical compliance records that were now being used to dismantle my career. My hands trembled with anger. 22 years of spotless service, erased. I had trained generations of researchers, upheld ethical standards, and built Crestline's reputation from the ground up. Now I was their scapegoat. My phone buzzed on the table, its glow cutting through the dim kitchen light. A text from Liam. Everyone's stunned. Interviews for your replacement already started. Cho looks rattled. Good. He should be scared. I inhaled deeply, steadying my heartbeat. Then I powered up my laptop, its familiar hum filling the quiet Austin apartment. One by one, I began assembling the evidence. First, a detailed report to the Institutional Ethics Review Board, outlining the falsified data and naming everyone involved. Next, a file for OSHA, complete with screenshots, lab logs, and a meticulous breakdown of chemical storage breaches. As I worked, the anger that had consumed me for days began to fade. What remained was clarity. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring the truth. About reminding people that science serves humanity, not shareholders or quarterly earnings. By midnight, the reports were polished, saved, and queued for submission. As dawn broke, I closed the laptop, stood, and walked to the window. The lights of downtown Austin shimmered in the morning haze, and for the first time in weeks, my heart felt steady. Tomorrow, everything would change. Not just for me, but for Crestline Pharma and the empire that thought they could erase me. Before heading to bed, I laid out my clothes for the next morning. The same navy blue blazer I had worn on my first day, and again on what they thought was my last. But tomorrow I had one final duty. One last act of stewardship for the truth I had guarded for 22 years. Soft morning light streamed through the kitchen blinds as I sipped my coffee, reviewing every page one final time. Every accusation backed by undeniable evidence. Every claim verifiable through independent audit. Meticulous because that's who I had always been. I sent the emails within minutes of each other, first to the Ethics Review Board, then to OSHA. The weight that lifted from my shoulders was almost dizzying. Whatever happened next, the truth was no longer buried. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Crestline Pharma flashed on the caller ID. I let it ring into voicemail. Another call. Blake Donnelly's number this time. Decline. I didn't need their panic, their threats, or their last-minute scrambling. The evidence spoke louder than any apology ever could. I dressed carefully, sliding my arms into the familiar jacket. In my bag, I placed a sealed envelope containing hard copies of every document I had submitted. Then I drove to Crestline Pharma one last time. The front desk receptionist, Jenna, looked visibly startled when she saw me. Ms. Wyatt, I thought. I mean, we were told. I'm just dropping something off, I said calmly, offering her the envelope. Please make sure this reaches the board of directors. It's important. I turned to leave, but hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway behind me. Dr. Daniel Cho was rushing toward me, his face tight with exhaustion and strain. Hannah, wait, he called out. I paused, letting him catch up. Up close, the toll of sleepless nights was written all over him, hollow cheeks, bloodshot eyes. Can we talk? He asked in a hoarse whisper. Privately. I don't think we have anything left to discuss, Dr. Cho, I said evenly, my voice steady. Please, he pressed, glancing nervously toward Blake's office. What happened yesterday, it wasn't right. I tried to say something, but I cut him off. Just like you stayed silent when you fast-tracked the trials. Just like you stayed silent when my credentials were used without my consent. His face drained of color. The bravado he once wore so easily evaporated. How did you? His voice cracked. 22 years, Dr. Cho, I said softly. 22 years of knowing every system, every protocol, every audit trail. And now, all of it, every lie, every shortcut is finally exposed. I kept my voice calm and steady. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Dr. Cho's mouth opened, then closed, his hands twitching at his sides. Blake said we needed the results fast-tracked for the Orion quarterly report, he murmured, eyes darting toward the executive wing. He said you were slowing things down. Too many checks, too much red tape. I gave a soft, bitter laugh. Those checks are what keep our research legitimate, Daniel. They're what protect patients. But I guess that didn't matter anymore, did it? His shoulders slumped, and for a flicker of a moment, I almost saw the promising young researcher I had once believed in before the ambition and politics swallowed him whole. But there was no room left for sympathy. Without another word, I turned and walked out of Crestline Pharma for the last time, my head held high. By noon, my phone lit up with call after call, most from unknown numbers. By 2 p.m., the local news had already picked up the story. OSHA inspectors had arrived unannounced at Crestline's labs. By 4 p.m., I received an email that made me pause, my heart catching in my chest. From Dr. Judith Monroe. Subject, proud of you. Hannah, I was contacted today by the Ethics Review Board about your report. I always knew you were the moral center of this lab. Would you be willing to meet? There's more we may need to bring into the light. I leaned back in my chair, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Dr. Monroe had been retired for years, but her reputation still carried weight across the scientific community. If she was stepping in, Crestline and Orion had no idea just how deep the reckoning was about to go. 2 days later, I sat across from her in her sunny Austin home. At 76, Judith was as sharp and warm as ever, her shelves lined with framed awards, scientific journals, and photos of old research teams. They've suspended all clinical trials at Crestline pending investigation, she told me as she poured coffee into delicate porcelain cups. OSHA found exactly what you reported. The ethics board is launching a full inquiry into data manipulation. I nodded slowly, feeling the warmth of the cup in my hands. And Dr. Cho? I asked. On administrative leave, she confirmed. He's cooperating, at least for now. Judith studied me closely. But there's something else, isn't there? She asked gently. Something you didn't include in the reports. I hesitated. She had always been perceptive. The NIH didn't just pull the grant because of compliance issues, I admitted quietly. About a month ago, I found anomalies in the trial data submitted for the NIH proposal. The improvement rates were suspiciously perfect, statistically improbable. When I compared the raw data to the final report, the discrepancies were obvious. I reached into my bag and handed her a slim folder. They didn't reject our grant over paperwork mistakes, I continued softly. They rejected it because someone on the review committee saw the same red flags I did. Judith's lips tightened as she flipped through the pages. And Blake knew. He had to, I said, my voice steady. I sent him an analysis 2 days before the NIH made their decision. When the rejection came through, he needed someone to blame. Someone expendable. Not Daniel, of course, Judith murmured, setting the folder aside. He was their star, their link to Orion's favor. So they sacrificed you. Welcome to corporate science, I said with a wry smile. Judith leaned forward, her expression fierce. Hannah, I'm assembling an independent review panel, some of my most trusted colleagues. With your documentation and testimony, we can make sure this isn't swept under the rug. Just then, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down, my eyes widening slightly. It's from the National Institutes of Health Office of Research Integrity, I murmured. They want a formal interview about Crestline, the grant application, and everything that's happened. Judith's face lit up with determination. The dominoes are falling, she said softly. And you, Hannah, just lit the fuse. Declined. I took a slow sip of coffee. When the rejection came through, Blake needed someone to blame. Someone expendable. I gave a small shrug. Not Dr. Cho, of course. He was their star, their golden ticket to Orion's favor. Judith snapped the folder closed with a sharp motion. 22 years of impeccable service, discarded. Welcome to corporate science, I said with a wry smile. Quite a shift from the lab you built. Indeed, she said grimly. Judith pushed the folder aside and fixed me with a steady, piercing gaze. Hannah, I'm assembling an independent review panel. Trusted colleagues from my university days are already on board. With your documentation and testimony, we can make sure this doesn't get buried. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new email. I glanced down and blinked, surprised. It's from the National Institutes of Health, Office of Research Integrity, I said, scanning the screen. They're requesting a formal interview about the Crestline grant and everything that's happened. Judith gave a small, satisfied nod. The dominoes are starting to fall, she murmured. Once one oversight body begins an investigation, the others are rarely far behind. She leaned in slightly, her voice softening. Hannah, what you've done, standing up for integrity when it would have been easier to walk away, that's exactly what Crestline once stood for. And I'm so sorry the institution I founded failed you so deeply. Her words struck something raw inside me. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a lump rise in my throat. Thank you, I said quietly, steadying my voice. That means more than you know. As I drove home from Judith's house, my phone rang again, flashing an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. Ms. Wyatt? This is William Harrington from the University of Texas Medical Research Division. Dr. Monroe suggested I reach out. We're looking for someone with your expertise to lead compliance and ethics training across our research programs. Would you be interested in discussing the opportunity? A deep sense of vindication swept through me. This fight had never been just about exposing corruption. It was about finding my rightful place again. somewhere my values would be seen as strengths, not obstacles. The interview at the University of Texas Medical Research Division went better than I could have imagined. As I spoke about my background, my unwavering commitment to scientific integrity, and the hard lessons learned from Crestline, I saw something in the panel's faces I hadn't seen in a long time: genuine respect. They didn't see a troublemaker. They saw a professional who had refused to compromise her principles. "Your recommendation from Dr. Monroe carries significant weight," said Dr. Harrington as he walked me to the lobby. "But it's your handling of the Crestline situation that impressed the committee most. We need leaders who stand for something." I left that day with a formal offer in hand: Director of Research Integrity and Compliance Training. A role where I could set standards, teach ethics, and help rebuild trust across multiple departments. Meanwhile, Crestline Pharma was unraveling faster than anyone had expected. The news channels lit up with headlines. OSHA had issued 27 citations against Crestline, several labeled as serious violations. The fines alone topped $350,000, but the reputational damage was far worse. Even more damning, Dr. Daniel Cho had cracked under pressure. He admitted to falsifying data at Blake Donnelly's direction and handed over emails and voice memos that tied Crestline's misconduct directly to Orion executives. What had started as my quiet, personal battle was now a full-blown reckoning, and Crestline would never be the same. Emails and recorded conversations that tied Crestline's misconduct directly to Orion executives. 1 week after meeting with Dr. Monroe, my phone rang again, but this time, the voice on the other end caught me off guard. "Ms. Wyatt, this is Charles Whitmore, chairman of the board at Crestline Pharma. Would you be willing to meet with us? We're conducting an internal investigation alongside the regulatory inquiries, and your insight would be invaluable." My first instinct was to decline. After all, they had turned their backs on me when it mattered most. But then I thought of Judith and her quiet mission to salvage what Crestline once stood for. "I'll meet with you," I said, but only with my legal counsel present. 2 days later, I walked back into the boardroom where I had once been publicly humiliated. This time, the air felt different, heavier. The board members looked drained, burdened by the storm of consequences crashing down on them. Blake's chair at the table sat conspicuously empty. "Where's Blake Donnelly?" I asked as the meeting opened. Charles cleared his throat. "Mr. Donnelly has been terminated, effective immediately. We've also severed ties with several Orion executives, and a complete leadership restructure is underway." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, though deep inside, a quiet satisfaction flickered. "Ms. Wyatt," Charles continued, "on behalf of Crestline Pharma's board of directors, we owe you a profound apology. The circumstances of your dismissal were not only unjust, they were potentially criminal." He glanced around the room, his voice steady but somber. "The board has authorized me to offer you full reinstatement, along with a substantial compensation package for the damage done to your career and reputation." My attorney and I exchanged a brief look. We had anticipated this. "I appreciate the offer," I said evenly, "but I've already accepted another position." Relief flickered across their faces until I added, "However, I would be willing to consult during your leadership transition, specifically to help rebuild your compliance systems and restore research integrity." The shift in the room was immediate and visible. They needed someone who knew the inner workings, someone who could help salvage Crestline's collapsing credibility. We negotiated a transition agreement that included a formal public apology, a retraction of all allegations made against me, and independent oversight moving forward. As we exited the boardroom, my attorney smiled. "That went even better than expected," she said. "They're desperate," I replied simply. "The NIH has suspended all their active grants pending review. Without certification and compliance, Crestline's future is on the line." That evening, I received a text from Liam. "They announced it at the all-staff meeting today. Blake's gone. Cho's gone. And they said, you were right all along." A few people even applauded. "Wish you could have seen it." I smiled at the message, but didn't reply right away. Instead, I powered up my laptop and began drafting a detailed transition blueprint, my final contribution to the company I had once given my heart to. Sometimes I realized redemption isn't about revenge. It's about helping rebuild something stronger, even if you're no longer there to watch it grow. I hadn't expected where this fight would lead. Yet 6 months later, I found myself seated before the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, preparing to testify on research ethics in privately funded laboratories. Across the hearing room, Blake Donnelly and 3 former Orion executives sat at a separate table, their faces pale and drawn. They had already been indicted on federal charges related to grant fraud. Now they were facing something almost worse: public accountability. Ms. Wyatt, Congresswoman Valerie Diaz began, her voice clear across the chamber. Could you describe the circumstances that led you to uncover these compliance violations? For the next hour, I spoke plainly. I described the relentless pressure to cut corners, the falsified records, the betrayal, and the personal cost of standing firm. And in your professional opinion, another committee member asked, how common are these practices? I met their eyes without hesitation. More common than anyone wants to admit, I said into the microphone. The pressure to secure funding and deliver marketable results often overrides scientific integrity. That's why we urgently need stronger whistleblower protections and stricter oversight for private research institutions. My testimony was broadcast across national news outlets. Clips of my calm, measured responses stood in stark contrast to Blake Donnelly's defensive stammering and the evasive, hollow statements from the Orion executives. Public opinion shifted almost overnight. A wave of support surged across the media and political landscape, calling for increased regulation of privately funded research facilities. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, Dr. Judith Monroe was waiting just beyond the hearing doors. She reached out and gently squeezed my hand. You didn't just expose Crestline's failures, she whispered. You sparked a national conversation about scientific ethics. As we made our way into the crowded hallway, reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, microphones pushing toward us. In the middle of the commotion, I caught sight of someone across the lobby. Blake. His expression was a tangled mix of anger, regret, and defeat. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, then he turned away, disappearing into the crowd. He had lost everything: his reputation, his career, and likely soon, his freedom. Meanwhile, I had gained something far more lasting: vindication. And a new beginning. 1 year after that fateful day at Crestline, I stood at the podium inside the largest lecture hall at the University of Texas, addressing a packed room of students, faculty, and visiting researchers. The topic of my keynote presentation: ethical guardianship, protecting integrity in scientific research. The pressures you'll face in your careers will be very real, I told them. Funding shortages, publication deadlines, corporate demands. But the moment you sacrifice scientific integrity is the moment you stop being a scientist and become something else entirely. The room was silent, attentive. From my new position at the university, I had developed a comprehensive ethics training program, now being adopted by research institutions across the country. What had once been a painful chapter of my life had become a practical blueprint for the next generation. After the lecture, as the crowd began to thin, a familiar face emerged through the throng. Liam Chen, my former lab assistant from Crestline. Professor Wyatt, he called out with a broad smile. That was incredible. So inspiring. Just Hannah these days, I said with a warm grin. How's everything going? Everything back at Crestline? I asked with a gentle smile. Better, Liam said, his eyes bright with cautious hope. The new leadership team implemented every protocol you designed. We're smaller now, but the work feels real again. We chatted for a few more minutes in the echoing hallway outside the lecture hall. Crestline Pharma had survived, humbled, reshaped, and far more cautious. Orion, on the other hand, had collapsed under the weight of lawsuits and federal fines exceeding hundreds of millions of dollars. As for Blake Donnelly and two former Orion executives, they were now facing federal prison sentences. Dr. Daniel Cho had avoided prison by cooperating fully, but his career in research was effectively over. "I've been offered a research position here at the university," Liam said hesitantly, his voice soft. "But I was wondering if you might consider being my advisor." I smiled, a warm rush of pride blooming in my chest as I looked at the young technician who had stood quietly by me when others stayed silent. "I'd be honored, Liam," I said. Later that evening, as I settled into my quiet apartment, a new email notification popped up on my laptop. It was from the Journal of Scientific Integrity. My article on reforming research ethics had been accepted for publication. Change was happening. Slow, stubborn, but real. And for the first time in a long while, I knew I hadn't just survived the storm, I had helped rebuild the sky. If you've stayed with me through this journey, I just want to say thank you. This story wasn't just about me. It was about anyone who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or pressured to compromise their values for someone else's gain. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for what was right, even when it cost you something? Have you ever been made to feel like integrity didn't matter, only to discover later that it was the most important thing you had? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I would be honored to read your experiences and reflections. Your story matters. And if you found strength, hope, or even just a spark of inspiration in what I've shared, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Together, we can build a community where courage, truth, and resilience are celebrated, not punished. If there's one piece of advice I can leave you with, it's this. Never trade your integrity for approval. It might seem easier in the short term to stay silent, to let things slide, or to protect your own comfort. But real respect, real impact, comes when you stand firm, even if your voice shakes, even if you stand alone. Integrity isn't just about grand gestures or headline moments. It's about the small decisions made quietly every day when no one is watching. Stay true to yourself. You're building something far stronger than a resume or a reputation. You're building a life you can be proud of. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me through this journey. This story wasn't just about corporate corruption, lawsuits, or headlines. It was about the quiet fight for integrity, the moments when you have to choose between comfort and conviction. If you felt connected to my journey, I would love for you to leave a comment below. Tell me what part of this story resonated with you. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand up for what was right, even when it cost you something? Have you ever been made to feel like your voice didn't matter, only to discover later that it held more power than you realized? Your experiences matter, and I would be honored to read your thoughts, your stories, and your reflections. If this journey has given you even a spark of inspiration or a moment of hope, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Together, we can build a space where courage is celebrated, where truth is valued, and where resilience is seen as the quiet strength it is. I believe we need more spaces like this, especially today, where people can remind each other that standing up matters, that integrity matters, and that we are never truly alone when we stand for something greater than ourselves. If there's one piece of advice I want you to carry into your own life, it's this. Never trade your integrity for approval. It's tempting to stay silent, to let things slide, or to avoid conflict for the sake of comfort. But real change, real respect, and real peace come when you choose to stand firm, even when your voice shakes, even when you're standing alone. Stay true to yourself. You're not just building a resume or a reputation. You're building a life you can be proud of.